Latin America is dying. One by one, country by country, like dominoes with a death wish, they are swallowing the socialism poison in seemingly ever-increasing doses. But there's something different here. Latin America is dying, but it's not dead yet. You've probably seen the headlines. Brazil, Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, even Chile, once a free market beacon in an otherwise restricted market region, all falling under the spell of socialist promises that have led, in every single prior case, to poverty, misery, and death. When you have such stark examples of the results of the two social systems right there in the same continent, it's hard to imagine how this can be happening. Not until you look very closely at the events on the ground in this part of the world do you begin to see what's really going on. People in Latin America are not embracing socialism, far from it. But they have had it with the corruption, lawlessness, and hypocrisy that seem to be a permanent fixture in South American politics. And they're eager to punish anyone who was unable to successfully and finally rid them of said corruption, even if, as happened recently in Brazil, they replace the old guard with a new old guard who is literally a convicted criminal. Well, I never said that their politics made rational sense, but in Brazil, for example, concurrent with electing said criminal, conservative politicians swept to victory after victory and now comprise close to 65% of the Brazilian Senate. It was the former president's inability to bring political corruption to heel that lost him his job. At least for now. Brazilians, it would seem, have short political memories. In Chile, socialists seemingly swept to power in 2021 and made the usual inclusive-sounding promises. In 2022, a constitution based on this sentiment was soundly defeated at the polls. Well, I'm sure the socialists will change course and accept a more freedom-oriented constitution, right? Mexico elected a socialist in 2018 whose, here's a shock, authoritarian policies turned voters off during the Mexican midterms in 2021, leading to substantial losses by the ruling party. Latin America is tired of corruption. Latin Americans want corruption to stop, but there's a bit of a bump in the road on their way to a lawful society. Latin American life is corrupt. When asked if you could evade taxes, skip the rules, or break the law to obtain personal gain, would you do it? 65% of Latin Americans said, paraphrasing, absolutely. And since this kind of polling generally underreports corruption, the real percentage is almost certainly much higher. There are all the usual reasons why this is true, but unfortunately, corruption in Latin America has been around for centuries and is unlikely to change anytime soon. The people of Latin America are unfortunately stuck in the same feedback loop as many of us here in the United States, albeit to a lesser extent. We think that better politicians are the answer to all of our problems. If we could just get the right people to be in charge of a patently corrupt system, everything would be just fine. What we don't realize, I guess, is that as long as we incentivize people in the private sector and people in the government sector to collude with each other, we are fighting a losing battle. Most people in Latin America and in the United States as well think that the only way to combat corruption is more regulation and more government control, which is the exact opposite of what we actually need. Take a look at this statistic. In Latin America, approximately 1 in 5 people report resorting to bribery to receive a public service. But what if there were no public servants to bribe? If, for example, Latin America did not have a free, socialized medicine, these so-called bribes would not happen. Instead, there would be actual payments for services, and the money would be going to doctors who provide the services. Would there be corrupt doctors? Sure. But this is important. Doctors would be accountable for the results of their services. Doctors who got poor results would get fewer patients. Doctors who got good results would get more patients. Right now, bureaucrats who have literally no stake in the treatment outcome are deciding when, if ever, people get treated. It's impossible. Impossible to prevent corruption when your entire social system incentivizes people to be corrupt. The good news in the case of Latin America is that there does not seem to be widespread ideological support for socialism. People just keep falling into the socialist trap, realizing that it doesn't work, and then climbing out again, and then repeating this process over and over. Without the ideological fervor that allows most socialist countries to limp along far longer than they should, Latin Americans have a much better chance for extricating themselves from this trap once and for all. Let's hope they do it sooner rather than later. Hopefully, it will help to have a shining example of what not to do right there in our own backyard.